everybody. Today is going to be my first video for one of the economics past papers, and this is a paper 2 exam. And basically I chose an exam from 2023, and this is May-June 2023 paper 2 variant 3. I have a data response question that is a compulsory question, so I'll just start with reading the question and I'll highlight the important points from the data response here. So the question says here, how will oil change Guyana? So Guyana is a country and they have given you a fact file for Guyana. So they have given you a population, they have given you estimated optimum population. So population here is 790,000 and estimated optimum population is more than the population that is there in Guyana right now. They're saying proportion of population living in poverty is 35%. They're saying here economic growth rate is 26%, unemployment rate is 11%, and the current account of balance of payments is minus 237 million, which is a deficit because it's a negative. So we know it's a deficit. So here they're saying Guyana was the fastest growing economy in the world in 2020. So they are saying they're going to tell you some important products that are produced by Guyana. So sugar, gold, and timber have accounted for a relatively high proportion of the country's output and exports for some time. So this is a major proportion of the country's total GDP, that is gold, timber, and sugar. Then they're saying in 2020, the sugar industry was hit by bad weather and falling global demand. So both of these things, so bad weather is going to decrease the supply of sugar, falling global demand is going to decrease the demand for sugar. So then they're saying in contrast, the output of gold and timber increased. The main reason why Guyana's real GDP increased so rapidly was the increase in oil production. So basically oil production is contributing to the GDP here. Oil was discovered offshore by a foreign multinational company in 2015, and the MNC started production in 2019. Then they're saying it is predicted that Guyana will become the world's largest producer of oil per head by 2025. The Guyanese government is planning to use some of the tax revenue it'll raise from oil to spend on education and improvements to the country's infrastructure. So both of these things, education and improvements to the country's infrastructure. Education basically improves the country's ability to produce output. So educating the labor or education in general is going to create more, basically increase the occupational mobility of labor, improve the skills of the labor. Also that will basically help us generate more output in future. So that is going to increase the productive potential of the economy. Improvements in the country's infrastructure is also going to reduce firms' costs. So if we have well-built roads and well-built underpasses and bridges, that's going to basically reduce the costs of the firms. So cost of supplying the output to let's say distributing the output to the different stores. So then they're saying planned projects include new railway lines and stations. So this is important. A more extensive and cheaper rail service may enable more people to work further from home and may influence the market for substitutes such as car transport. So that is what the key here is, that if there is a railway line in the country and within the city, for example, so it is very easy for labor to move to different areas to work, and basically it increases the geographical mobility of labor. And they are also saying that market for substitutes such as car transport. So basically if there is a cheaper rail service and I am easily able to go to my workplace using the rail service within the city, I can reduce my use of my car, so my personal car. So this is basically going to decrease the demand for cars, and the cheaper price of railway is going to increase the demand for railways and decrease the demand for car transport. Then they're saying basically substitute is a factor that that influences the demand substitutes. So if the price of rail transport is going to decrease, that is basically going to increase the demand for railways and decrease the demand for cars. That is the substitute to rail transport. So public transport, personal car is a substitute to the public transport, that is railway in this case. Then they're saying the Guyanese government is also planning to spend some of the tax revenue on improving the country's access to the internet. This is also very important. This is going to increase the output in future. It's a very good thing to have like if the major proportion of the country is has access to internet, so it's a very positive thing for the country, and they can produce more output. There will be more connectivity. It's easy to contact people, and it's easy to learn new skills on the internet. Then they're saying table 1.1 shows GDP per head and internet access in 7 countries in 2020. If you look at the GDP per head and population with internet access percentage, you will basically see this trend that the higher the GDP per head, the higher the population with internet access. So this is the general relationship that has been shown in this table. So I'll tell you, there are 2 countries like France has a very high GDP per head and a quite high population percentage that has internet access, and Iceland has a quite high GDP per head and again very high population with the internet access. But there are exceptions in this case also, so when we'll do the questions we'll discuss that. Then they are saying Guyana has experienced a slow growth in its population size in recent years. In 2020, its birth rate was 16.5, its death rate was 6.8, and its net migration rate was -7.7. With increases in oil production, emigration may decline, and the country may start to experience net immigration. So there are 2 concepts here. Emigration means people leaving the country and working somewhere else in some other country. Immigration means people coming to our country and working in our country. So basically immigration increases the labor force size in our country, and emigration basically reduces the number of people, reduces the population in our country. So E with emigration with an E is people going out of the country. Immigration with an I, people coming in our country. A higher population may affect Guyana in a number of ways, including changing the size of its labor force and affecting the environment. Okay. And then they have given you these questions, and we can see here we have 8 parts in question number 1. And then they're saying calculate the number of people who were living in poverty in Guyana in 2020. I need to use the fact file. They have given me 35% population is living in poverty. Total population is 790,000. So basically I'll do 35 divided by 100 multiplied by 790,000, and I'll get 276,500. This is the number of people living in poverty in Guyana. Then they are saying identify 2 causes of the decrease in output of sugar in 2020. It's very important to know the command words very well. Here the command word is identify. Identify does not require you to write detailed answer. It just requires you to write points. So when it's identify and they're saying 2 causes, just use the data response to identify those 2 causes. We did that when we were reading the data response. It's bad weather and falling global demand. So basically decrease in output of sugar in 2020. Bad weather is decreasing the supply of sugar. Falling global demand means people don't want to buy sugar, so obviously sellers would not produce that much sugar. So decrease in output. 2 reasons for decrease in output is bad weather and falling global demand. Okay, in the next part they are saying explain how economic growth is measured. So we have again explain as a command word here. So I'll tell you what command words actually I have taken this out from the syllabus document, and if you guys see here, explain says set out purposes or reasons make the relationship between things evident, provide why or how, and support with relevant evidence. So here they're saying explain, and it's for 2 marks. So you need to have a point and explanation about how or why in that particular situation. So I'll just apply this to the situation. They're saying explain how economic growth is measured. So you guys already know that economic growth is basically the percentage increase in the output over a period of time. So let's say last year we were making output worth of $100,000, and this year let's say we are making output worth of $120,000. So that's basically growth in output. But you should know that growth in the real GDP is basically economic growth. So growth in real GDP basically accounts for the effect of inflation. So when GDP is counted, a number GDP will tell you, okay, GDP is this number. But when you bring it down, when you just adjust it according to the rate of inflation, that is when you know in reality how much output has grown. So here you need to write growth in real GDP is basically measured when economic growth. To measure economic growth, we need to measure the growth in the real GDP or the total real income of the country. So real GDP is also equal to the real income of the country because obviously GDP is the total output that is produced in the country, and real income is basically when this output is sold, it becomes the income of people. So total income of the country is also the total GDP of the country, and real GDP here is going to be measuring the growth in terms of real GDP is what you need to write here. So real GDP, the change in real GDP is basically the percentage change in real GDP is basically the economic growth. And this is basically how it is measured. So the percentage change in real GDP. Then they're saying in part D, explain 2 reasons why labor mobility may increase in Guyana in the future. So labor mobility, I always tell this to my students, you guys should know this, that labor mobility is of 2 types. One is occupational mobility and the other is geographical mobility. Occupational mobility is simply that me as a labor, am I able to do different tasks? So labor is a factor of production, right? And if labor is able to do multiple tasks, then they are more occupationally mobile. So occupational mobility is basically task mobility. So if the more the skills I have, the more mobile I am. So then geographical mobility is my ability to move from one area to another, one region to another, to basically pursue a job. So let's say if I'm employed somewhere and then I'm asked to move to some other city to continue my job. So that's going to be, if I accept that job, then that means I am geographically mobile. If I don't accept that job, then that means I am geographically immobile. So here they're saying give 2 reasons. So we need to give 2 reasons, and then we need to explain them as well. So here we did highlight those reasons. So the government is planning to use some of the tax revenue to spend on education. So when the government spends money on education, that is going to improve the workers' skills and it's going to better train them. So spending on education, government increases spending on education, which improves workers' skills, trains them to do different jobs and different tasks and variety of tasks. Therefore, occupational mobility of labor will increase because of that. Also, the government is building new railway lines and stations, and it's a cheaper and more expensive rail service, which will enable people to work further from home. This is basically, they've given you this in the data response. So, a cheaper railway line. So, the government is building better railway networks, more extensive and cheaper railway lines. This will enable people to work further away from their homes, increases geographical mobility of labor. And then you can also write that the government is planning to spend more money so that people have more access to internet, which also enables them to learn multiple skills on the internet, and then that will make them more occupationally mobile. So that will be a very, very detailed answer, and that is going to help you gain a lot of marks in this kind of a question. Explain is a quite easy question. It's basically knowledge based, and then you need to give the why, the reasoning, the how of the point that you're giving in this question. In the next part, they're saying draw a demand and draw a demand and supply diagram to show the effect of a decrease in the price of rail transport on the market for car transport. So we need to make the diagram for car transport. So what is happening is that price of railway transport is basically the government is providing cheaper railway service, so the price of railway transport is decreasing. The demand for railway transport will increase, but this demand is basically, this is an extension that is going to happen in the demand curve for a railway transport. So whenever there's extension, so whenever price falls and demand increases because of the fall in price, then that is going to be an extension in the demand. For car transport, so this is the demand curve and this is the original, I have just made this original equilibrium for you guys. This is the original equilibrium for car transport, but when the price of rail transport goes down, the demand for rail transport increases, automatically what will happen is that the demand for car transport will fall, and therefore we need to shift the demand curve to the left. And this demand curve from D2, it'll shift to D1, and D1 will be your new curve. So basically your new equilibrium will be this, and we'll mark this as P1, price, and quantity will be Q1. And you guys will see there's a fall in price and there's a fall in quantity. There's a contraction in the supply curve. So there's no movement, there is no shift in the supply curve, but there's a contraction that is happening in the supply curve because demand curve is shifting towards the left. People are not preferring car transport, people are preferring rail transport. So this is basically leading to a decrease in price in car transport, and then producers don't have an incentive to supply more cars because people are not demanding cars anymore. So this will lead to a contraction in the supply curve for cars. So basically there's this substitutes, it's going to shift the demand curve. So if there is a decrease in the price of substitute, like railway is the substitute for car transport, if the price for railway goes down, the demand for railway will extend, it will increase, but there will be a shift in the demand curve towards the left for car transport. And then that's it. So, but they're saying here, draw a demand and supply diagram. They haven't said, they haven't written analyze. They have said draw a demand and supply diagram. And this is for 4 marks. You guys are just supposed to draw the diagram. You don't need to write the analysis because they don't require an analysis here. Okay. In the next part, they are saying analyze. So analyze the relationship between GDP per head and internet access. And if you guys have some experience of solving economics O-level past papers, in all the data response questions, they have one figure in which they have given you country information, and then there are two things that there's a relationship that is given in that table always. So it'll be a relationship between some two economic variables, like here they are saying GDP per head and internet access. So percentage of population with internet access. So that is what the relationship between these two. And in most data response questions, in fact in all data response questions, there's a table, there's this relationship. They have given you one question on that table, on that relationship. They are saying here, analyze the relationship between GDP per head and internet access is a direct relationship, like we discussed earlier when I was reading the data response. The relationships shown here, like if you see France and Iceland have the highest GDP per head and the highest percentage of people of the highest percentage of population with internet access. Similarly, there's this Zambia is the country with the lowest GDP per head and the lowest level of, not the lowest, the second lowest, but the lowest level of internet access. Eritrea is the country with the lowest GDP per head and the lowest, the smallest percentage of population with internet access. However, there are exceptions. So here in this, when I have written this, basically this is not like a proper answer, but you guys know already that when you guys write answers in economics, they should be in a paragraph form, especially when they say explain or they say analyze or when they say discuss. All these command words require you to write answers in paragraphs. So in part F, they are saying, basically I wrote this for you guys. The relationship between GDP per head and internet access is a direct relationship. The higher the GDP per head, the greater the proportion of population which has internet access to the internet. Then there's you need to say, you need to tell, basically you need to give examples of those countries which comply with the relationship. Countries that comply with the relationship are Iceland, France, and Eritrea has the lowest GDP per head and the lowest percentage of population with internet access. Iceland and France have the highest GDP per head and the most number of people with internet access. Then you need to write about exceptions. So exceptions is Morocco has a lower GDP per head than Guyana, which is true. Morocco has a lower GDP per head, 3204, and Guyana has a GDP per head of 6160. However, in Morocco there are more number of people with internet access as compared to Guyana. So however, Morocco has a greater percentage of population which has access to the internet as compared to Guyana. Then what you need to tell is the reason for the relationship. So if you have a higher GDP per head, that means your country, people in your country have a higher average income, and when people have higher average income, their affordability is better, so they can obviously afford better internet services also if they have higher incomes. Okay, in the next part there are two questions of basically with the command word of discuss, and part G is saying here that discuss whether or not the discovery of oil is likely to increase living standards in Guyana. So there are two important keywords here. One is discovery of oil and the other is living standards. So you basically need to link the two. So discovery of oil is like there's more production, there's more output of oil, and obviously when you have more output you will generate more incomes. That output can be exported to other countries and we can earn export revenue from that as well. So I usually do this, that I ask my students to write the yes points and the no points, and then when you're writing for your exam you need to brainstorm and just write pointers. Here I have written detailed points so that you are able to write proper answers from this. This is not going to be accepted as an answer जो मैंने यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, this is not going to be accepted as a proper answer. You need to write in paragraphs and give your answer in paragraphs. So you'll write all the yes points, you'll support the argument, and you'll support the argument with let's say you have 2 points in the supporting side, but then you need to write however, and then write the points that go against the argument in the question. So what you need to do is that you should have points and development with the points. Only points are not going to help you, and they're not going to help you gain the most marks. Here basically you in the yes side it's saying, I have written this for you guys, increase in GDP of the country means there will be, basically if you discover more oil, more natural resources are discovered, that'll lead to an increase in GDP, because when you'll discover more oil, you'll produce output related to oil, and that output can also be generated to other countries, and that will help us earn the export revenue. Also, it will improve the country's current account of balance of payments. But you guys need to write that export revenue will increase incomes in our country, and when it increases incomes, people's affordability will increase, people's living standards will increase. What will happen is that when we'll produce more output related to oil, there will be more workforce that will be needed, so more labor will be required, and therefore employment of the country will also increase. There will be more people with incomes now, therefore they'll be able to afford more goods and services, afford better healthcare, afford better education. That will also improve their living standards overall. Also, when there is this more output that is being produced, there will be more income. More incomes will be generated. When more incomes will be spent on goods and services, government will generate more tax revenue. This tax revenue can be spent on people to provide them welfare services by the government, so the government can build more hospitals, more educational institutions, more parks for people, let's say, and then that'll improve their living standards. On the other hand, on the no side of this, you guys need to write the discovery of oil means oil extraction. Oil extraction again will create more pollution, so that'll lead to more external costs in the economy, so that'll basically harm the environment, and also it can cause health problems, reduce life expectancy. People who are involved in the extraction of oil will also have health problems, because it's not a very safe procedure to extract oil. The foreign MNC undertaking oil production may deplete all the oil reserves. So basically, economic growth may not be sustainable in future. So right now, currently, if we use all the oil reserves to generate export revenue, what will happen if there is no oil reserves? There are no oil reserves left for future generations. So yes, economic growth due to oil extraction and production may not be sustainable, and then over dependence on oil means that we're just depending for the country's total income. We are just depending on oil, which is not a very it's not something very good for future generations, because oil is a natural resource and it will deplete one day. So currently, in the current world scenario, there are many oil countries who are trying to diversify in other areas so that they can earn revenues through the other areas. Like Saudi Arabia is also diversifying into tourism so that they can earn more money in future, because oil is a natural resource and it's going to deplete one day. It's going to deplete soon. So over dependence on oil, that means that once all the oil reserves have been used, the country may not have any other products or specialities to earn from. So what happens is that then we don't have any other source of income, and then obviously our living standards may fall in future if we are not left with any reserves of oil. So what living standards are in general, you guys need to know that income is something that tells living standards of someone, and then there's education, there's healthcare, there's air quality, there's pollution. If there is pollution, living standards are low, of course. Living conditions, psychological health, housing facilities, access to basics like water, electricity, gas, etc. All of these comes in living standards. So living standard is something very broad. In the next part, they are saying, discuss whether or not Guyana would benefit from an increase in its size of population. So if population increases, whether Guyana will benefit or no, you guys have to you guys need to discuss this in the answer. In the yes points, what you guys need to write is that labor force is basically if there are more people immigrating to our country and they are part of the labor force, that will increase the size of the labor force, and if the size of population is increasing, and if it's increasing because of the size of the labor force, then of course we can produce more output in future. Total GDP will increase for the country. More tax revenue can be generated because there will be more people working, there will be more people spending money on goods and services. So both direct and indirect tax revenue will increase. Also, the government can use this tax revenue to provide different services to people, so that's going to benefit the Guyanese economy. Then what will happen is that if there are more people, then that means they'll spend more on goods and services. When they spend more on goods and services, the aggregate demand in the economy will increase. When aggregate demand in the economy increases, firms will want to supply more goods and services, so that will also increase output. So overall, when output will increase, incomes will increase, economic growth will take place. Currently the population is under the optimum level, so if there's immigration of labor force, if it's immigration of people, the population will come to the optimum level and resources will be used more efficiently. If it's labor force that's coming in the country, so it's very good for Guyanese economy because there will be more people, more labor means more output, and more labor, if they're employed, that means more tax revenue. If you guys see the no side of this question, basically when more people will come into our country, that is Guyana, what will happen is that it'll put downward pressure on workers' wages because there will be a lot of supply of labor. So if there is a lot of supply of labor, what happens is that what firms are willing to pay to their labor is going to be low, because if I have a lot of people to choose from to employ labor force from, so then that just gives me more choice as an employer. So I may offer very low wages to my labor. So that's going to be a very it's not going to be it's something very it's something that is going to be disadvantageous to the people of Guyana, because someone from outside have come into their country and they are giving them competition. So there's a lot of labor force now to choose from, so firms will offer them lower wages. Then I have written for you guys, larger population will create more pollution. That means obviously there will be more people, so there will be more cars, there will be more traffic congestion, there will be more damage to the environment. The scarce resources, if the population is above the optimum population, that means scarce resources will now be split onto more number of people. That will just put more pressure on scarce resources. Then what I have written for you guys is overpopulation may put a lot of burden on scarce resources. We just discussed that. Also may lead to a rise in housing prices. So what happens is that when there is immigration and when there is overpopulation, so there are a lot of people coming towards the country, the housing prices over there go up, because obviously everybody would want to have a house over there, or rent a house over there. So what happens is that housing becomes expensive in such a country where there is overpopulation and a lot of people coming from other countries. Also, too many people means there will be too much aggregate demand. So if there's overpopulation, there will be too much aggregate demand in the economy, and if the supply does not cope up with the aggregate demand, what happens is that leads to demand pull inflation. So there are too many people who want to buy goods and services, but there are not too many goods and services in order to fulfill their demand. In order to fulfill their demand, so that leads to demand pull inflation in the economy, which is also disadvantageous to the economy of Guyana. So that's it for this video. I hope this helps you, because this is a very interesting part of the paper. If you guys know how to solve it well, honestly, it's very scoring. Thank you so much for watching.